The demand had already been read into the record by the time I found my seat. Shh. I was the session clerk for the Joint Treaty Commission that morning. A junior appointment, mostly ceremonial, the kind of role that puts a young man at a small desk beneath the gallery rail with a stylus and a mandate to get every word down. I had no authority in that chamber. I had no voice. My job was to record what happened. What I recorded that day took me 3 years to fully understand. The merchant cartel of Veth had called the session. They did not often convene formal proceeding. It cost them trade hours, and the cartel measured everything in trade hours. But they had decided, after 11 months of deliberation, that Earth's border seizure of the cargo convoy, Hulvis Reach, required a public accounting. Their advocate, four-limbed elder called Proctor Desh, had read the demand scroll into the record, with the particular satisfaction of someone who had already written the ending. Earth's ambassador would stand, acknowledge the seizure as unauthorized, offer a formal apology on behalf of the Terran diplomatic mission, and commit to restitution in 3 installments. That was the script. It was printed, distributed, and sitting in front of every delegation before the session opened. Someone had even bothered to specify the wording of the apology. That is how certain they were. Ambassador Kala Soren sat at the Earth table and received the demand scroll from the cartel's floor steward. She was not a large woman. She wore a dark-fitted coat with no insignia. Her gray-streaked hair pulled back with the efficiency of someone who had stopped caring what rooms thought of her appearance some time ago. She read the scroll, in the time it would take you to read a short letter. Then she placed it face down on the table. She did not look up. She said something quiet to her aide. "Perrin, I could not hear it from my station," and Perrin made a note. That was all. Proctor Desh waited. The cartel's secondary advocates waited. 3 allied delegations in the gallery waited. The chamber held about 40 bodies that morning, and for a moment that I still remember clearly, every one of them was watching the back of Soren's hand resting on top of that upended scroll. When she did not speak, Desh leaned toward his table mic. His expression was not unkind. It was the expression of a man explaining something to someone who had not understood the question the first time. Ambassador Soren, the Commission has received and recorded the cartel's formal demand. You are now invited to respond. She looked up then, not at Desh, at the chamber generally, a slow, even sweep of the room, the way you might look out a window at weather you had already dressed for. Then the corner of her mouth moved, very slightly, in a direction that was not quite a smile, but was close enough to one that Desh registered it. His expression shifted. "We have heard you," she said. "Go ahead." It took Desh a moment to process that. "Ambassador, I believe you have misunderstood. We are inviting your response to the demand." "I understand," she said. "Please continue." There was a pause long enough that I wrote the word pause in my notes and then crossed it out, because I could not think of a better word. And that irritated me. I had clerked 7 sessions for the Commission. I had seen delegations stall, deflect, request recesses, demand translation reviews, call for procedural holds. I had never seen a delegation simply invite the body to continue without engaging the substance at all. It was not defiance, exactly. Defiance has an edge to it, a raised chin, a hard set to the jaw. What Soren had done was closer to the look of someone watching a clock they knew. It was already set correctly. Desh conferred with his secondary advocates in a low, rapid cluster of sound. Then he straightened. When he spoke again, the warmth was gone. The cartel formally escalates. In light of the Terran delegation's failure to respond in good standing, this commission is now asked to note an additional finding. That Earth's silence constitutes contempt of the formal proceeding, pounding the original breach. We move to enter that finding into the permanent record. It was a strong move. Tempt findings had weight. They followed a trade body's reputation through every subsequent negotiation for years. Several delegations in the gallery had shifted forward. I was writing faster. Perrin slid something across the table to Soren. A chip drive, no larger than a thumbnail. She picked it up with 2 fingers, looked at it briefly, and set it down beside her water glass. "Proctor Desh," she said, "you've moved to enter findings into the permanent record of this commission. We have. Then, I would like to make use of the proceeding as well." She lifted the chip and held it toward the commission's data steward, a small automated unit seated at the floor's central console. and spoke, clearly enough that I caught every word without effort. 11 years of cargo manifests, tariff filings, and transit logs for every cartel vessel operating inside Terran-adjacent space corridors, filed under the Halveth's Reach Registry, and 14 associated shell designations. Authenticate and enter them, please. Data steward received the chip. No one in that chamber said anything while the authentication ran. I know because I was watching, and I had nothing to write. What came up on the Commission's display panels, the ones lining the inner walls of the chamber at delegate eye level, was not what the cartel had prepared for. Cargo weights that did not match filed manifests, transit fees declared at a fraction of assessed value across 6 consecutive fiscal cycles, ghost vessel designations that shared registration numbers with Cartel flagships, still operating under valid treaty exemption. Every entry tagged, timestamped, cross-referenced to the treaty clauses they had violated, and the Terran inspection logs that had been formally dismissed. Cartel request, as incomplete at the time. 11 years of it. One of the cartel's secondary advocates, the younger one, a narrow-bodied Veth with pale crest scales, looked at his own panel, then at Desh, then back at his panel. His mouth opened once and did not close cleanly. A delegate from the syndicate contingent in the gallery pulled up a separate query on her own console and stared at it for a long time without writing anything down. I stopped writing and looked at Desh. His 4 limbs had gone very still in a way that, I would later learn, indicated acute physiological distress in his species, the equivalent of a man going pale. His secondary advocates were conferring in sounds I could not interpret, but the register had changed entirely. Soren had already stood up. "I want to thank the cartel," she said, and she meant every word of it, for requesting a formal proceeding. We had been waiting for one. She picked up her water glass, finished it, set it down precisely where it had been, and walked out. Aaron followed her, pulling the door closed behind them with a click that sounded, in that particular silence, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I looked at my notes, then I looked at the room. 3 allied delegations were already in quiet conference with their own data panels, pulling up the cartel's joint venture filings. A syndicate rep from the upper gallery had descended to the floor and was asking the Commission's data steward for a certified copy of the record. Dr. Desh had not moved. The Commission chair, a slow, careful Horath named Veln, who I do not think I ever saw hurry, called a recess with the particular tone of a man who already knew the session was over and was giving everyone dignified way to understand that without saying it plainly. The recess became an adjournment. The adjournment became a full suspension. The cartel's trade licenses, the ones backed by the 3 allied delegations in the gallery, were suspended within the same business cycle, pending a separate review that I understand is still ongoing. 2 of those allied delegations filed separate petitions within the week, formally distancing themselves from the cartel's transit operations. They had been in that room. They had seen the same panels. Formal apology the cartel had demanded was never given. The cartel never asked again. I filed the session record that afternoon in a quiet office down the corridor and went home. It took me a long time, in the years that followed, find the right way to describe what I had watched. People asked sometimes. They expected a story about courage, about a declaration, about the moment humanity stood up and said something that changed everything. What I told them, eventually, was simpler than that. She had read the demand, set it down, and waited for them to make it official. That was all she needed them to do. Everything that followed was already in the chip. They gave her the podium. She used it. That was the whole of it.